Hey guys. This is part 12 of What If Naruto Died and Became a Hollow. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 48, El Tercer Imperio. Las Noches was completely abandoned. 10 years ago, the fortress would have been thriving with abundant hollow and Arrancar activity, but there had been a change in power from around that time. Aizen Sasuke had been killed and replaced as leader, and with that the purpose of Las Noches had disappeared. The Arrancar that had been left over had relocated into eastern Hueco Mundo, and the palace was left empty in their wake. A lone man walked through the ruins of Hueco Mund, looking for something. He was dressed in a white trench coat and hat, and was carrying what seemed to be some kind of standard for an organization. It was his group that had been responsible for reducing the palace of Las Noches to ruins, and they still couldn't find any information until today. Taicho, we found out where they are, he called out. Ever since the rebellion, the Arrancar had disappeared from this part of Hueco Mundo, long before the Vanden Reich had set up their base within Hueco Mundo. Without Arrancars that they could subjugate and bend to their will, their plans had been delayed by several years. They hadn't been able to declare war on Soul Society. The member of the Jaged army turned around, the standard he was flying pivoting with him. He was looking at a man who was sitting in an ornate chair in the middle of the landscape, his legs crossed and his hand resting on his cheek. He looked calmly pleased with the news. Courage Opie didn't say anything to his subordinate. They weren't stupid, they could finish the report on their own. Courage's subordinate looked at the surrounding area one last time. We believe they relocated 10 years ago after the fall of Aizen into eastern Hueco Mundo, several thousand miles away from Las Noches. They are apparently planning something, but I'm not sure what. Regardless, we can track their whereabouts from here on, he reported. Courage smiled a little wider, and got to his feet. I see. What will we do now, sir? Asked the Jaged army member. Courage walked up to him. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to make the trip to their new headquarters, and establish contact with these Arrancar. We are the recruiting officers of the Vanden Reich, and we will see if we can subjugate them, bend them to our will if you please, Courage said, turning his back on his subordinate. Juhabak-sama would need to be informed about these recent events. But sir, this Vulpes seed that is leading this group is said to be very uncontrollable and powerful. Are you sure we can subjugate these Arrancar with a leader like that? He asked. Don't you worry, we are the Jaged army of the Vanden Reich. There is no Arrancar we can't subjugate. West of Las Noches, in the opposite direction of the Reino Animal and Naruto's new locale, there lied a strange fortress that had been erected into the Hueco Mundo desert, after the Vanden Reich had gained access to Hueco Mundo. In terms of architecture, it seemed to be very similar to Las Noches, though it wasn't on the scale of such a palace. It was a much simpler abode, but within it lied an army that was truly to be feared, with a leader that wasn't the most pleasant man to be following. Like Las Noches, there was a throne room that held this particular leader of the palace. He was a large man, with long black hair and munchops that could give even the most rugged man a run for his money. He was Juhabak. His right-hand man Hashwald stood at the foot of his throne. His lord was particularly aloof towards his Quincy warriors, even if he was absolutely ruthless to an Arrancar. The invasion of Hueco Mundo hadn't really gone as planned thus far. They hadn't located many Arrancar though, so there were only a few dozen within their army. Juhabak-sama, it appears that we have located the base of Vulpes C, as Soul Society calls him, Hashwald said, as his leader calmly reacted to the news. I see. Arrancars have been precious valuables around here, but now we have stumbled upon a vast gold mine of them. What of Courage? He asked. He's on his way back now. He apparently wants to take a few of the stern Ritter with him to confront the Arrancar. After that, he's going to travel to their base and establish contact with them. Their leader will be the most troublesome to deal with, Hashwald said. Yes, he will be. However, conquering Hueco Mundo is not the only project we have on our mind now. We need to deal with the Soul Society as well, and I believe I know a way that we may soften up these Arankar should they be hard to subjugate, Jaged said. You mean? Yes, the Konoha Association may be able to play a firm role in this, and we may consolidate this by using the only Shinigami we have within the Stern Ritter. Follow me, he said, rising from his throne. Hashwald bowed to his lord, following him out of the throne room and into the hallway. They walked for just a few seconds, coming to a plain door at the end of the hall with the letter L plastered on it. Hashwald looked at it bizarrely for a second. Stern Ritter L, the Love. The only member of the entire Vanden Reich that is a Shinigami, but not just any Shinigami. The current captain of the Kido Corps and Soul Society, and a double agent for us, he whispered, as Juvabak knocked on the door gently. Come in, came a suave female voice. It was at that moment that Hashwald realized that he had never even been in Stern Ritter L's room or even seen her. She usually kept to herself when she was in the Vanden Reich fortress. Juvabak smirked, before he opened the door lightly. The room was pitch black, but Hashwald could tell what was inside the room from a few outlines, and it was fairly disturbing. The moldy old wallpaper was peeling, but that wasn't the striking thing about the walls. Rather, all throughout it, the words "Do you love me" were scratched into the wood with what appeared to be a crude blade. The room itself was a mess, with bloody sheets and tattered furniture all over the floor, and a particularly large vanity in the back end of the room. There were two stands opposite each other just inside the room, holding clothes. One seemed to hold the Stern Ritter's Vanden Reich uniform, and the other seemed to hold her Kido Corps robes. There was a bed over to the far right, with a human figure shadowed in it. Hashwald couldn't really see her, but he assumed that she was the Stern Ritter they were looking for. It was strange looking at her. She seemed to be going back and forth through this bizarre motion with her arm, making this breathy moaning noise while she was at it. She also seemed to be completely naked. Hashwald grimaced as he realized what was going on, and hastily averted his eyes even though he couldn't actually see her inside the room. Juvabak was unfazed by the whole spectacle, though he did not walk inside. Oh, Juvabak, what brings you to my room? She asked, a tinge of lust inside her tone. Juvabak smiled. You probably could figure it out by now. We've found the location of Vulpes C and his army. We're going to establish contact. But you, as the captain of the Kido Corps, have a suitable tie with the Konoha Association, who have been known to desire an invasion of Hueco Mundo and a declaration of war against that hollow. You have the means to ensure their transportation to Hueco Mundo. Make sure they get here. He trailed off, as the nude woman finished her business and stood on her feet. She didn't step into the light though. Sakura. 10 years ago, Naruto and his Espada vacated Las Noches for a much simpler area in eastern Hueco Mundo. Unbeknownst to him, Las Noches had been destroyed as a building a few months prior, but no Shinigami attack force ever invaded Hueco Mundo. Naruto had stopped by his old kingdom once, to pick up El Libro de Ciclos, which he had left there in his long absence. But despite leaving once again, there was no lavish palace or system of government in place now. The new locale for Naruto's fighting force was a few hundred miles west of the Hueco Mundo coast, where the desert began to turn into grasslands. Instead of a palace or fortress, there were about 50 large tents, 10 shacks, and a massive long hall in the center which housed all of the Arankar force. The Hollow Force resided in about a 100-mile radius around the long hall, and most of them were congregated in a massive canyon that the settlement overlooked, or underground. Each of the shacks belonged to a particular espada, but inside the long hall was a massive table based off of the one found within Las Noches, with a giant chair behind it that could serve as a throne. The desert around the area served as the training grounds for all personnel. Outside the settlement's ground, Kurge Opie and 2 Jagdarmi overlooked the area. They couldn't see any Arankar out on the surface, but they knew the second they found this place that it was where they were. The Ryatsa here was fierce, but they were ready. They spotted the massive long hall in the center. That was where they needed to go, and Vulpes C already knew they were coming. This was supposed to be a diplomatic meeting between 2 rival groups, but that would most likely go downhill very fast. As the Jagdarmi walked throughout the village, a few Arankar walked around the makeshift village. Some of them chuckled at the Quincy's, and others glared. But what was truly odd about them was that not a single one attacked Courage. Instead, they give him his space, which seemed to be an indicator that Vulpes C knew he was here. And he was giving him the warmest welcome he knew of. Courage opened the door to the long hall. There was nobody there except for the single figure sitting on the chair on the far end of the room. Courage was surprised. This wasn't like the reports of Vulpes C. What sat in front of him appeared to be little more than a blonde kid who looked about 16 or 17, even if he was an Arrancar. Naruto's appearance remained relatively unchanged throughout the 10 years. His age hadn't changed at all, and he kept the Arrancar uniform that had been popularized by Aizen Sasuke. Even his mask fragments remained the same, and the average person wouldn't be able to tell that this Arrancar had mastered the Resurrection, Segunda Etapa not too long ago. Because of this, Naruto exuded an aura of power that he hadn't before, even at the height of his service underneath Aizen Sasuke. Courage had gotten a glimpse of another Espada while filing into the village. He could tell by his Ryatsu. It was a long, skinny-looking Arrancar with a strange scythe-like Zanpakuto. His appearance too had not changed at all from years before, but this Espada oozed power, and on the inside, there were differences. If these Espada released their Zanpakutos, there would be differences of power from 10 years ago. These 10 Arrancar were dangerous killing machines, and were worlds beyond that of their old selves. Courage didn't know what they were capable of, or even what their names were, but in hindsight this might have been a bad idea. He wasn't feeling too confident after feeling their Ryatsu, and he didn't know if the Vanden Reich would be able to subjugate them, or even match them in combat. So, you're part of that group that's been sneaking around Hueco Mundo these past few years? Going by the looks of you and the feel of your Ryatsu, you're all Quincy's, he stated. Already, Naruto was entertaining about killing them, and it was unlikely that this people would leave alive. Yes, sir, Vulpes C, sir. My name is Courage Opie, and I am the first jaged army of the Vanden Reich. It is my great hope that our two organizations can get along well in the future. Courage started, fake politeness tinging his voice. Someone's going to be sent to kill me. These Quincy's just want to conquer Hueco Mundo. Naruto thought. And what does your group want from us? Well, it is our hope that we form an alliance with you. For a limited time only, my leader allowing Arrancar to become our comrades, so please don't miss this precious chance. Courage was smiling deviously in his mind. This wasn't likely to work out in their favor, so they would have to use alternative methods to get them to their side. The Arrancar leader didn't seem to be the wiser about this. Naruto grinned deviously at Courage and the other two Vanden Reich members, before he stood up from his chair. He pointed at them seriously, before he panned his eyes to behind him for a second, before Courage could notice. No, I will not ally myself with you fucking humans, and I definitely won't be subservient to whoever the hell your leader is. If you want to talk business, tell your leader to come himself, and also tell him to not bring any ass-kissing lackeys next time. Maybe he should just kill them now. Courage never lost that calm smile on his face, but he raised his hand in what was supposed to be a placating gesture. Naruto grinned. He did bring people like them after all. He locked eyes with Courage, never breaking eye contact as two figures burst through the wooden walls of the long hall and rushed towards him. Courage grinned before laughing. He had brought two stern Ritter along with him for purely this reason, to get the jump on Naruto should he refuse their offer. Stern Ritter U, Nana Najakup and Stern Ritter O, Driscoll Bursey were the ones that he had brought along with him. They had been lying in wait outside the long hall, listening in on the conversation, prepared to intervene if need be. They were in midair, directly behind Naruto. The Arrancar was still turned towards Courage, and seemingly hadn't noticed their presence yet. Of course, in reality he noticed their presence a few minutes ago. They came at him with a speed that was relatively easy to manage. Naruto was prepared for them. He used Sonito, and dashed away from the spot where they were aiming to attack, flashing into a spot a few feet away from where they struck the ground. He released his Ryatsu, and drew his Zanpakuto, flicking it horizontally in a light swing. It caught Nanana in a quick flash, bisecting him down the middle while he was in the process of recoiling from his own attack. Driscoll started in anger, surprised at how quick Naruto was. Naruto grinned psychotically, appearing behind Driscoll before he could even react. Naruto sheathed his Zanpakuto, and then thrust his hand into Driscoll's abdomen, quick as a flash. Driscoll couldn't even get out his Quincy weapon to retaliate. "You know, I haven't killed a Quincy in a long time," he started, putting a hand to his chin in mock thought. He twisted his hand in Driscoll's abdomen, allowing the larger man to gasp in pain. "Your arrival here makes me want to just go to the human world and slaughter anyone who has even the slightest amount of unique abilities. The fact that you people are alive means that Soul Society missed some 200 years ago, unfortunately," Naruto said. He pulled his hand out of the Quincy, and when he doubled over in pain, Naruto kicked him up at a frightening rate, jamming him in the roof of the long hall. He flicked his Zanpakuto one last time, and the two Vanden Reich that were supporting Courage were sliced in half by the simple wind of his blow. Courage was standing there, rooted in place. He didn't dare get out his own weapon. "Leave. If you want to talk negotiations, bring your actual boss here next time. Though I won't guarantee that I won't use my army and just obliterate your forces right now. You Quincy's don't belong in Hueco Mundo anyway." Courage turned to leave, but he heard a raucous laughter come from behind him as soon as he turned his back on Naruto. "Oh wait. I've changed my mind," Naruto said happily, bringing out his Zanpakuto yet again. Despite promising to let Courage go, Naruto bisected the Jaged army leader before he could even react, with a giddy little chuckle. "Woo, that felt good. Not being a subordinate to Aizen has really done wonders for my emotional state," he said, lazily flopping down on his throne. He would have to call a meeting with the Espada to discuss this new matter, but in approximately a week there were more important matters to attend to. All of their reserve army had been rounded up and underneath one leadership, and Stark had mastered his segunda etapa about a month before, the last one to do so. They were ready. Kurosaki Ichigo was beginning to forget things. Nothing important, of course. He knew that he was once a substitute Shinigami for Soul Society. He knew he had friends that were killed 10 years ago and lost no chase. He remembered his family and friends that he left behind in the human world. He thought about them every day of his life. However, he was having a hard time remembering faces. His home of Karakura town got fuzzier and fuzzier in his memory as the days went by, and there were only a few very important faces he could recall from off the top of his head. This honestly worried him. If he spent so much time in Hueco Mundo, would his old memories leave him completely? He had discussed this with Orihime many times, but she couldn't give him a straight answer either. Whatever the case, they had given up on ever returning to the human world after Ichigo had tried and failed to open up a Garganta. The vagrant life within Hueco Mundo had turned the two humans wild, though. Ichigo was still in his Shinigami form, so he had aged less than Orihime had by quite a bit. Granted, he was still a human, and therefore even he didn't have the full slowed aging of a true Shinigami, and altogether he looked like he was around 18. He looked a little bulkier than when he was a teenager, and his orange hair had gotten even wilder. On his face there was a little bit of stubble, and his robes had become tattered from years of wearing them. Orihime, on the other hand, had been affected by standard human aging. Gone was the young high school girl of around 16, and in her place was a mature, voluptuous 26-year-old woman. Yet, Hueco Mundo had affected even her. Her straight, glossy hair had become wild and almost tattered, and the same robe she had worn all this time was becoming as tattered as Ichigo's. All in all, she looked like an Amazonian woman, minus the height. They had wandered into the east after they had escaped from Las Noches. For the first few months, they were forced to eat small hollows that came out of the desert landscape, but once the desert turned into grassland, they were able to find edible plants all throughout the area. They continued wandering after that, never really in a hurry to be anywhere. Overall, they were at least able to find some appreciation for the natural beauty of Hueco Mundo, but they longed for their home anyway. Despite seeing many different locales within Hueco Mundo, even they were surprised when they reached the coastline. And the shocks would continue when they spotted an enormous palace inland by only a few miles. The palace had set off both Ichigo and Orihime's nerves. It reminded them too much of Las Noches. Despite that, there was something about it that was off, but Ichigo couldn't quite place what it was. The main gates to the palace were wide open, and looked like they hadn't been moved in years. In fact, the entire palace was like that, now that Ichigo looked at it a bit closer. The paint was beginning to fade, and the walls themselves were becoming eroded. Ichigo tentatively stepped inside the main gates of the palace, Orihime close behind him. It wasn't long before they came across the foyer of the palace, where the Hueco Mundo sky overlooked all of the area. There wasn't a hollow or Arrancar in sight. This place had been abandoned for years, it seemed like. There were a few buildings that rose up out of the landscape, but overall the inside of the palace just seemed to be a flat plain. There were two particular buildings that caught their eye, however, as these were the biggest and most obvious landmarks in the area. One was a plain gray building of Bauhaus architecture, though with its broken windows it obviously wasn't serving any purpose. The other landmark was even larger than the building, and it resembled a stadium of sorts. Out of all the landmarks here, this one seemed by far the most intact of the bunch, though it also had a sort of lonely feel to it. Ichigo turned to Orihime, and Orihime turned to Ichigo. They were wandering spirits after all. They would go wherever their hearts told them to. Something about that stadium told them that there might be useful resources available to them there. It took them about half an hour to get there, and the wrought iron gates that served as the entrance were rusted clean off, allowing the two humans to easily breach the security of the arena. Ichigo stepped out onto the field, taking a look into the spectators' stands. Several of the seats were being overgrown with vines. As he stepped onto the floor, his foot made a strange noise as it walked. Curious, he bent over, looking at the dirt that covered the arena floor. After a little bit of digging, he struck metal. "Hey, Inoue! Come look at this!" he called out, as the woman walked out onto the stage. She walked up to her companion, looking down at the metal contraption. There was a line going between the metal, separating it into two halves, and it looked like it could be opened. "Well, what do you think?" Ichigo asked. Orihime didn't say anything, and Ichigo took her lack of an answer that this was something worth investigating. He took another look at the stands, noticing what seemed to be an announcer's box high in the balcony. "Kurosaki-kun?" Orihime asked as Ichigo began to ascend the steps to the box. He approached the door and jiggled the knob a little bit. The locks had also apparently rusted over time, and he was able to gain access with no real trouble. The inside of the room was dark, obviously, but there was a peculiar mechanism on the opposite side of the side, and besides the announcer's table it seemed to be the only important feature within the room. Ichigo touched the lever of the machine. It was broken. Still, it looked like it could still be moved with a little bit of elbow grease, so the substitute Shinigami pulled on it tightly, feeling the tumblers underneath slowly but surely begin to move. With a little shove, he pulled the lever down completely. There was a low rumbling that resounded throughout the area, which made Ichigo shake in place a little bit. Orihime stumbled, rapidly getting out of the way and into the stands as the floor began to move. The metal doors that were on the stadium floor were opening, displacing the dirt as they retreated into the arena. Ichigo and Orihime watched with bated breath. They didn't know what this was, but both of them had a bad feeling about what they would find. It took a few minutes for it to open completely, and the mechanism got jammed a few times. When the floor had receded entirely, Orihime looked over the edge. She adjusted her eyes for a moment, before they widened. Ichigo was up in the box when he heard Orihime scream. He turned around faster than he realized, throwing himself out of the announcer's box and rushing to Orihime's aid. Thankfully for him, Orihime wasn't harmed in the slightest, and there wasn't a hollow attack in the slightest. Despite that, something seemed to have stunned her, as she was pointing a shaky finger down in the hole, her eyes fixated on something that was apparently down there. 3 seconds later, and Ichigo was right beside her. "Inoue, what's wrong?" He was cut off as he looked down into the pit, and he grimaced in disgust and alarm. Down there were a multitude of corpses, but Ichigo could tell they were not of hollow origin. They had no masks or holes that would identify them as such, and Ichigo didn't know how to describe them. The blood had dried along the walls, so he knew that they had been dead for quite some time now, but there were other questions that popped into his head. What were they doing here, and how did they die among them? There was one faint ryatsu he could detect down in the pit, and he tentatively looked over the edge. Huddled in the corner seemed to be a girl of around 16 years of age. Her face was buried in her hands, but going from her dirty garb, Ichigo could tell that she had been here for a while. Ichigo winced at the gaunt face that looked up towards the light as her cavern opened. How long had she truly been down here? And why was she the only humanoid figure in a room where everyone else had been turned into something not of this world? Her stare was pure insanity, though. The way that she looked at the two of them sent shivers down his spine. And slowly, she was beginning to get to her feet. She attempted to talk, but no words came out. She hadn't used her voice box for the better part of a century. She didn't even know if she could speak her own language anymore. She attempted to talk, the words coming out as garbled screech, before she finally got a grasp on the words she was looking for. Who are you? Chapter 49, Caballero Estrella. What is this? Ichigo managed to get out, looking down upon the grisly display of events. Despite that, the fate of those things weren't what was bothering him, as they looked like they had been dead for years. No, it was the young girl who looked around his age who was still alive down there. How long had she been here? Hey! He said impulsively, jumping down into the pit. Orihime tried to stop him, but he had already gone down there, picking up the near-unconscious, gibbering girl in his hands, using his Shinigami powers to hop back up onto the ledge. He laid the blonde girl down the ground. She was dirty and ragged. Her eyes were wide open and staring into space, reflecting the lunacy that was held within them. Her mouth was open, but most of the time no sound came out, and when it did, it was pure gibberish. When she managed to enunciate full sentences, they were very garbled and difficult to understand. Are you okay? Ichigo asked frantically. Ichigo winced a little as she grasped his wrist very forcefully, tilting her head slowly to look at him. Her eyes suddenly became even more bloodshot, and an abject hiss sounded as she opened her mouth. Kill me. Now! She hissed, before she screamed the last part out. Out of impulse, Ichigo tore himself free of the girl's grasp, stepping away and staring at her incredulously. The way she had said that disturbed both Ichigo and Orihime. It wasn't a kind of pleading tone, one where they were absolutely desperate to die. No, instead it was an angry, demanding kind of tone, one that promised great pain should her request be denied. Kill me now! She shouted again, not getting up. Ichigo took an uneasy step forward, once again going up to the fallen girl. He stared at her tentatively, watching as she occasionally twitched. What happened here? Why are you here? Who are you? He opted to ask instead of complete the girl's request. Surprisingly, the girl didn't fly into a rage at that. Pit. Konoha. Hollow, killed them, mercy, she babbled onwards, her words making no sense to the pair of other humans who had stumbled across her. What's she saying, Kurosaki-kun? Orihime asked, trying to decipher the jumbled words. I think she's trying to tell us something about this pit, and what happened down there. Ichigo commented, watching the girl go through yet another spasm. Ichigo dropped his sword into the ground as her spasms got more violent, pulling her head onto his lap to support her. He did this to all of us. Had to kill them, she mumbled. Her sentences seemed to be getting less jumbled. Did this to who? Orihime asked soothingly, trying not to set the girl on edge. Name. Naruto. Turned comrades into things. Had to kill them, couldn't let them suffer any more, she said. Her eyes were fairly blank, and all she did now was stare into space, and from the way her voice sounded, she was talking to either Ichigo or Orihime. Ichigo latched onto one word in that sentence. Naruto? Who's that? The name sounded familiar, and Ichigo felt that this Naruto person was someone he should know. King of place. Attacked. Konoha, she replied, before she stopped staring out into space. Suddenly, like she wasn't even motionless anymore, her arm shot out, grabbing Ichigo's sword and holding it to her own neck. Must die, been unable to, had to find a way to save them, but it was hopeless, she babbled. A few tears fell down from her eyelids, but whether it was joy over a long sought-after release, or sorrow over past events, no one could tell. This action seemed to catch both Ichigo and Orihime off guard, with the former wondering how he had been so careless to allow a sharp weapon within this clearly suicidal girl's grasp. Wait, don't be so hasty. You don't have to do this. Ichigo shouted at her, while making sure to not make any sudden movements that would startle the girl enough for her to thrust forward. "The pain's too much," she said in her first full sentence of the entire conversation. She seemed to be becoming more and more aware of her surroundings as time went on. Before Ichigo or Orihime could manage to get out another word, the girl plunged Ichigo's sword into her jugular vein, effectively ending her life as red liquid poured from the vital spot at an impossible-to-halt rate. Ichigo wrenched the sword from her grasp just a split second too late, just as the girl penetrated her own flesh deep enough and fell to the ground, coughing heavily, but with a last-minute smile on her face. The two travelers were shocked by how quickly that occurred. Within minutes of freeing the girl from the deep chamber, she babbles some words that they really couldn't make sense of, and then takes her own life. It was so surreal that neither of them knew what to make of it. Things like this just didn't happen, not even in Hueco Mundo. At least, not without a cause. There was something about this that stuck on Ichigo's mind, however. The girl that had just committed suicide seemed to point to the fact that there was a certain culprit who organized whatever had happened. The girl also seemed to mention that she had killed a bunch of her own villagers, which meant that there were more people who were subjected to a seemingly similar fate. This seemed to be a hollow kingdom, similar to ones that Ichigo and Orihime had encountered during their travels, but it was on a much larger scale, not to mention it seemed abandoned. This Naruto person seemed to be important in the scale of things though. Perhaps he was their leader? Whatever the case, he seemed to be the one who was responsible for this spectacle, but there was too much information they hadn't gleaned, and therefore they didn't know the full circumstances of the incident that the girl was talking about. Regardless, they knew that some horrible crime had taken place here. Johabak-sama. A lone, injured member of the Jagmurdi stumbled through the Vanden Reich Palace in Hueco Mundo, having just got back from her recruiting mission on the other side of the world. After witnessing the events that took place there, he had to rush back as soon as possible. This was bad. This was very, very bad. He barged into the throne room. Screw the consequences. Johabak was sitting on his throne, a light smile on his face as he regarded the disturbed Jagd army member. On his right was his faithful servant, Hashwald. On his left was a pink-haired woman that the Jagd army didn't recognize. He knew, however, from the crazed look in her eyes that he never wanted to cross her. "Johabak-sama, we've got trouble," he shouted at his leader. If it were any other situation, he would have bowed in his presence. What? You are part of the Jagd army, right? Where is Courage?" Johabak asked. "Dead," the Jagd army member stuttered out. "He's dead. They're all dead. Courage Taishu and the two stern ritters sent with us are all dead," he shouted desperately at his supreme leader. Johabak had the decency to look slightly taken aback. "What? On that mission of yours? Who killed them?" "Vivolpas see, Your Highness. Although, I've heard that his real name is Naruto. The leader of the Arrancar, whatever the case. He's the one who killed them, and so quickly too. It was a massacre. They never stood a chance." He paused for a moment. "He said that if we wanted to talk negotiations, you needed to go, Johabak-sama." Instead of being wiped off his face, Johabaka's smile actually got wider. He relaxed in his seat, and turned to look at Sakura. Her eyes had widened significantly after she heard the Jagd army speak Naruto's name, and even he couldn't tell what she was thinking. The woman looked quite a bit different than when he had last seen her. Her face had been covered in shadow then, but now one could see that she looked like a woman of around 25, with shoulder-length pink hair pulled into a short ponytail, which was looped through the back of her Vanden Reich cap. Instead of being totally naked like earlier, she was fully clothed in a custom-made Vanden Reich uniform, similar in appearance to Bambietta's. Her zanpakuto was held at her hip, a fairly short katana with a pink hilt and seashell-shaped guard. "It's all right. I know you didn't mean to fail, now did you?" Johabak asked, a little too politely. The Jagd army blinked for a moment, before a hole the size of a basketball was punched straight through his stomach. Nobody flinched. "I guess those three weren't enough to convince them. We still need Arrancar power though, and they're the only ones who can supply it. I'll have to send someone who is capable enough to show off our power to them," Juhabak mused. He turned to the left. Sakura, would you be willing to pick up Kurge's mission and recruit some more Arrancar? With your power, it shouldn't be difficult to defeat them, even if their leader seems to be somewhat powerful. Sakura smiled deviously, but didn't say a word. That was enough confirmation that Juhabak needed. The Vanden Reich palace lay in ruin, similar to Las Noches. The wooden infrastructure had been completely demolished, but this time dead bodies were sprinkled all over the blood, and the smell of blood lingered in the air. On top of the pile of wood, Haruno Sakura stood triumphant, still dressed in her Vanden Reich uniform, though her feet was resting on the dead body of Juhabak. For she had killed all of them. Every last one. Sakura had no use for the Vanden Reich anymore. No, now that she learned of Naruto's whereabouts, she had bigger fish to try. Her hatred of Hollows notwithstanding, she would find him. Yet, her other objective, bring the members of Konoha to Hueco Mundo, was still in play. If only for her own personal desire and gain, she would get them to Hueco Mundo. Especially with her upcoming ceremony within Soul Society, it would be perfect. But first, she needed to find Naruto. Naruto suited himself up for the attack on Soul Society, and was about to call all his espada to him so they could begin the invasion. Sale had already completed all preparations. They left, today. They destroyed Soul Society, today. Naruto could hardly wait. He fastened his Zanpakuto to his waist and adjusted his Arrancar uniform, descending from his throne and crossing the long hall. He opened the flap to his tent, stepping out into the Hueco Mundo air. As he breached outside, a pale Arrancar around his size approached him. Like many of the other Espada, Ulquiorra's outward appearance in his unreleased had changed much. Other than his mask covering more of his head, there wasn't anything. Despite that, Ulquiorra had proven himself immensely when he revealed that he was the only one before the use of the Hogyoku to have obtained Segunda Etapa. With that goal already reached, he had spent the next 10 years simply improving his already existing abilities, and as such he had attained the position of Segunda Espada, behind only Naruto himself. Naruto, we're having a little issue. A random woman showed up in the camp today asking for you. She's already killed 3 of our Arrancar. Should I send her your way? Ulquiorra asked. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Could it be more Quincy's? Yeah, go ahead and do that. I'll see what the fuss is about and deal with her myself if I have to, he said, still a little confused. What was the big deal about this woman? As long as she didn't kill any Espada, there was nothing to worry about. Naruto's attitude did a quick 180 as the woman in question entered his field of vision and noticed him. Her features were a little different, and she looked older, but he knew that shock of pink hair from anywhere. Haruno Sakura. Naruto's passive face took on an extreme look of hatred as his brow furrowed. His pupils began tiny pinpricks in a sea of red, and he bit his bottom lip in a massive sneer, his fangs poking through his mouth. He snarled so loudly it might as well have been a scream, and released the full brunt of his Ryatsu. All around the camp, Arrancar and Hollows alike held their breath as they felt the full force of their leader's Ryatsu, smothering them like an ocean of water. Ulquiorra, who was the most resistant to it, turned his back stoically, but even he had a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek. He had only felt this force of Ryatsu from Naruto once before, and that could only mean one thing. Something big was about to happen, and they weren't even in Soul Society yet. Rage still on his face, Naruto drew his Zanpakuto immediately, rushing Sakura and slammed his sword down on her with all the force he could muster. The clang of metal was heard all around the camp as Sakura actually managed to block Naruto's attack. Sakura was standing there, a lustful smirk on her face as she blocked Naruto's first attack. She slowly licked her lips and pushed off Naruto with her own Zanpakuto. Naruto lightly jumped back, putting distance between the two. Sakura, he sneered. He clutched his Zanpakuto tight in his hands when he saw the smirk on her face. I've been looking all over for you, Naruto, and I've finally found you, she said, her tongue peeking out of her lips yet again. She didn't sense Naruto's extreme hatred towards her. Or better yet, she sensed it, and was drinking it up. I can feel your anger. Neither Naruto nor Sakura realized that she just uttered one of the most famous movie quotes ever, but the words did their purpose and had a profound effect on Naruto. "Bitch!" he roared. He sheathed his Zanpakuto for a moment. He then put both of his hands out, spreading each and every one of his fingers out a fair distance. He concentrated his Ryatsu to his hands, where each of his fingers lit up with a little blip of orange. "Diaz Zeros!" he shouted, as the blips of light formed into individual Zeros. The 10 beams rocketed off of his hands, each one almost as strong as a normal Zero. The 10 beams of orange traveled in a straight line for a second, before they merged together to form one giant attack that barreled towards Sakura. Sakura held one hand out, catching the giant Zero with her palm. Her grin faltered as she realized she didn't have the strength to fully stop it, and just as she was about to be overwhelmed, she dodged to the side instantly. The blast obliterated everything in its path, including a few tents with Arrancar inside them. Sakura whistled at the damage, smiling as she grabbed her Vanden Reich cap and threw it to the side. Naruto fired another round of the same attacks, and Sakura's eyes narrowed a little bit in mirth. "It seems you've become much stronger over the years. You're even leading this massive. Truly, the destructive power of this attack is incredible." But she trailed off, talking to herself. She held her Zanpakuto out. "Hado number 91, Senju Kuten Tai Ho," she said. Pink dots, similar in appearance to Naruto's Zero, formed in the air around Sakura like a halo. When she fired them off, it converged on the rapidly approaching Zero, effectively canceling out the attack in a gigantic explosion. The impact of the two Kaido and the Zero caused an enormous cloud of dust to rise in the area, giving both Naruto and Sakura cover. Naruto looked around for her, but when out of the corner of his eye he saw a quick flash of movement, he raised his Zanpakuto and swung out. Sakura was in midair, her Zanpakuto slashing downwards at Naruto's scalp. Naruto met her attack with an upward slice, grinding his Zanpakuto against hers. Sakura swung her hips to the rhythm of the attack, getting herself pumped up for the fight. Naruto himself seemed to get over his initial anger towards Sakura, and was now in euphoric fight mode, where he could finally kill this bitch. "This is too good. I never thought that one of my targets would actually come to me," Naruto guffawed. Sakura wasn't fazed. It seems like you're still obsessed with getting a date with me. Let me ask you, do you love me?" Sakura whispered that last part, as a look of lust entered her eyes. She stood there in an almost seductive position, crooning at Naruto. "Huh?" Naruto asked. Her behavior was perplexing, even to him. "I'm asking if you love me. I can feel such strong feelings coming from you. It has to be love," she shouted chaotically at Naruto, who laughed raucously at her. "Love you? Fuck no, bitch." That seemed to spurn on the first negative reaction that Sakura gave Naruto. A vein popped on her forehead, but her entire face reddened in anger, and her eyes bulged out in rage. "What?" she screamed in indignation, like it was the most surprising thing in the world. She released her full Ryatsu in her rage, and swung her Zanpakuto to the sky. "Tempt," she shouted, as water surrounded the tip of her blade. Naruto was on guard. He muttered. "Hankara." She finished her Zanpakuto release. The wave of water wrapped around her katana, glowing with Sakura's pink Ryatsu. She thrust it down into the ground, sending a shockwave into the dirt and sand. Naruto focused on the ripple of force that was moving through the ground, before his eyes snapped open and he jumped off of the ground, landing in midair right above a hut. Arrancar that were in the surrounding area moved out of the way of the fight, hoping they didn't get caught in the crossfire. Whatever the invader was doing couldn't be good either. The ripple of force settled, and it was quiet for a few seconds. But after that, a jet of water erupted from the ground like a geyser, spreading a few inches of water depth throughout the surrounding area. Naruto heard a rumbling from underneath the hut he was floating near, before he dodged another geyser that erupted from the ground. While he was moving through the air, focusing on the water, Sakura attacked him in midair, trying to lop off his head in her rage. Naruto just got his sword up in time, but the force of her blow was staggering. Yet there was something off about the whole thing. The water on the ground didn't look normal, or anything. Normal water was completely clear, or it was in the human world at least, but this water looked shinier. It seemed to have a lustrous quality to it, and it was setting off alarm bells in Naruto's head. Sakura's Zanpakuto also changed. Instead of a normal, metal katana like an unreleased Zanpakuto, it was now completely made out of calcium. To be more specific, it seemed to be completely made out of seashell. The hilt was made of seashell, the guard was made of seashell, and the blade was made of seashell. It seemed sharp too, but what really caught Naruto's eye was the tip of blade, which was actually wide instead of narrow, with a large opening that ran into the blade. It was like there was a conch shell merged straight into the sword. Naruto swung his sword 3 more times in quick succession, and Sakura blocked them all. His last strike actually got caught in the ridges of her sword, and it broke his rhythm when he yanked it out quickly. Using his momentary confusion, Sakura flipped over Naruto's head, attempted to carve in his unprotected back. Naruto swung around to match her speed, driving his own blade into the hole of the conch. He attempted to wrestle Sakura's released sword from her grasp, but Sakura's insane strength remained tried and true even during the afterlife. Naruto was beginning to overwhelm her, and Sakura was growling at him. However, before Naruto could wrench the blade fully from her grasp, a jet of highly pressurized water shot from the conch on Sakura's blade, barreling right into Naruto's talk. The force of the blow pushed Naruto back as the water seared his stomach. He grunted in pain as he impacted a hut directly behind, destroying it completely. He rose from the rubble, wiping blood away from his mouth. There was something off about this battle. Sakura had proven herself for a very worthy opponent. He couldn't even fathom how she had gotten this strong. And yet, her shuriken was surprisingly dull. She used it well obviously, but he thought that someone of her caliber should have a more impressive shuriken. That, and the strange quality of the water put him on edge. There was something missing here. If she was hiding her current abilities, it would only make things more difficult in the long run. Unfortunately for him, she also gave off no clues as to what her other abilities could be, except for the shine upon the water. But he had no idea what it did. He projected a look of hatred at Sakura, and it was clear that she could feel his emotions. Strangely, his hatred for her seemed to put her at ease, and she giggled sadistically a little bit, her rage all but forgotten. "Oh, I see what's going on. You're playing hard to get, aren't you?" she asked, to the confusion of Naruto. Was this bitch confusing hatred for love or something? She was as crazy as him. Sakura wove her sword around, dispelling her shuriken and sheathing her blade. "What are you doing? You know this battle's not over yet. I'm gonna kill you right here, bitch!" Naruto shouted. Sakura smirked at Naruto. She knew how to get the advantage over him. "No, you're not. And do you know why? It's because I am a necessary asset if you want to truly destroy Soul Society," she blurted out, making Naruto halt in place. "How do you know about that?" "Oh, please, Naruto," she snorted. "I was a double agent for Aizen within Soul Society before you took him out. I knew you were the Primera Espada, and I knew all about your desire to destroy Soul Society. The only thing I didn't know was that you had the stones to actually challenge and defeat Aizen, and your location over the past few years. And now, I'm going to join the winning team." Naruto attacked once again, slamming his blade into the ground as Sakura dodged to the side. "I don't believe you, bitch. What makes you think you have anything you could offer me?" Sakura held up a finger. "It's simple, really. I offer you what might be the most important piece of your entire plan. You see, I am the captain of the Kiddo Corps within Soul Society, but I'm getting promoted tomorrow, due to my creation of a new type of Kiddo. From that point on, I will become a new member of the Zero Division, or otherwise known as the Royal Guard. I assume you know the only way one is able to access the Ryokyu?" she asked rhetorically. Naruto was silent. "I'm sure you have your own little plan worked out at this point, but at this point the only way to access the Ryokyu is through a member of the Royal Guard. I assumed that you had planned to lure them out of their hiding place when you completely destroyed Soul Society. That might be effective, but it's a risky move if you're trying to access the Ryokyu. I am the only way you can have guaranteed passage to the Ryokyu." Not to mention, as I right now I could open a portal to the real world or Soul Society and tell them all about your invasion, rendering your surprise attack useless. Bitch, he whispered. The Libro de Ciclos didn't cover too much on actual passage to the Ryokyu. It only told him what he needed to do once he actually breached that dimension. A member of the Royal Guard was necessary, but he figured he could bide his time once he had finished taking out the regular part of Soul Society. Now, however, their plans could go a lot smoother. He contemplated for a moment, before he clenched his fists in anger. Fyakak! He screamed to the heavens, his anger shaking through the nearby huts and long hall. As much as he wanted to deny her, he knew he possibly couldn't at this rate. He could try and kill her and find some way to harness the power of her bones, but he was getting restless. He needed to destroy Soul Society, and he needed to do it now. Fine. Have it your way. You'll help us access the Ryokyu when we're finished destroying the main part of Soul Society, but you will not help us with main attack on Siriidii. I don't want to see your face while we're fighting. Naruto spat at her. Sakura smirked. Excellent, love. I'm looking forward to working with you again. I've missed you over the years. She winked at Naruto, who sneered at her. This was an infuriating thorn in his side. Sakura had already put her hands together, almost like she was doing hand seals from the living world. However, she glowed with a pink ryatsu, and a few seconds later, a portal had opened in mid-air space. It was almost identical in appearance to Garganta, except that the void inside was a bright white instead of a cold black. I will have the preparations for your passage to the Ryokyu ready tomorrow, as soon as I am promoted, she said, as she disappeared into the void, which then rippled closed. Naruto remained standing there, a sour look upon his face. You don't trust her, do you? A new voice said, stepping out of the shadows. Naruto's pissy face turned to view Ulquiorra stepping out of the awnings of a hut. Of course I don't. She's a Shinigami, after all, and I can tell, she's changed even since she died. I know that's obvious, considering she probably died over 300 years ago, but still, she baffles me. I can't tell if she's leading us into a trap, or if she legitimately wants to help us. Even if that's true, I can't stand taking help from a bitch I want to kill. You're going to kill her once she's not useful anymore, aren't you? Ulquiorra deadpanned. Naruto looked at Ulquiorra. Did you even need to ask? This may not even hinder your plan, regardless of whether or not it is a trap. Ulquiorra stated. How so? Think about it, Naruto. We have eluded the eyes of Soul Society for years. It is safe to say that they do not know about us. If she truly was a double agent for Soul Society and Aizen, she cannot come out with that information in Soul Society. She would likely be executed, and the fact that she seemed to be part of that Quincy organization also seems to add credence to that. Despite that, even if she immediately goes back to Soul Society and relays this newfound information to the Siriidii, there is not enough suitable time for them to prepare countermeasures for our attack. We are attacking them today, within hours. The most she can do is warn them of our attack, which will do no more than impede progress slightly. Is there a chance that she lied about her loyalties, and has truly been loyal to Soul Society? Could the Soul Society have perhaps staged this display, her being part of the Vanden Reich and a double agent for Aizen? I don't think so. According to our latest report, the Soul Society has not figured out how to use Garganta yet. That means that her true loyalties would have to be to the Vanden Reich, or as Aizen's double agent. It's the only way that she'd even be able to be here in the first place. You saw that Garganta though, right? What if she's the secret to Soul Society getting to Hueco Mundo? I did see that Garganta. However, Sale's spies have kept good reports within the Soul Society ever since we've connected to their world. They do not know how to use Garganta. She is keeping her power a secret from them. I see. I will trust you on this matter, Ulquiorra, but we've wasted too much time as is. I'll take your advice. We will attack now in order to prevent them from taking countermeasures, on the off chance that she is loyal to Soul Society. Is Sale ready? Yes. Naruto grinned, his previous mood evaporating. Good, let's go. Chapter 50, Invasion de la Garganta. The Konoha Association was ready for battle. Sakura walked through the hallways of the Suriidai, her Shinigami robes billowing as she walked. It was mere hours before her promotion to the Zero Division, before her bones would officially become Ryukin. When that happened, she could officially betray the Soul Society in favor of Naruto's invasion, but even then she didn't have much of a part in it until the grand finale. But first, she needed to remove some of the adversaries that Naruto would have to face, even without his express permission. Split up the forces, to be put more casually. She had created that Gargantasque Kid spell just a few years ago, and that is how she was able to be promoted to the Royal Guard. She had always remained distant from the Konoha Association, and they had always remained distant from her. But when she announced to the world just a few weeks ago that she had cracked the secret to a Garganta, they had contacted her for the first time. They had gotten a warrant for an invasion of Hueco Mundo decades ago, but the problem of the Garganta had always loomed directly over their heads. With it finally solved, they could extract justice from Konoha's destroyers. And that was exactly what Sakura wanted. There were many members of the Konoha Association, and many of them were elite Shinigami. Minato and Kushina in particular were among the strongest Shinigami in the Soul Society, beaten only by Yamamoto, and although they didn't know it, herself. She had coordinated this perfectly. Set up an alliance with Naruto's force while making sure that the Konoha Association would invade Hueco Mundo. Best case scenario, they remove them indefinitely. Worst case, they still have enough time to bide in order to split the enemy's forces in two. Although they didn't know it, they had played right into her hand. She was on her way right now to set up the preparations for their passage to Hueco Mundo, just as she was sure that Naruto was setting up his preparations. They were sure to miss each other. She opened the door to the association's meeting hall, which had to be renovated over the years. It was now a massive auditorium, where the members of the association would sit around in a circle. The leaders and more higher-ranking members would be seating near the front, and they were the ones who would be leading the charge. The association had grown quite a bit over the years, as more and more villagers from Konoha made it there. And yet, the association had never found Naruto. The thought seemed to depress Minato, even more so than when he learned of Konoha's actions on his corpse, as well as Kakashi's death within Hueco Mundo. All the more reason to invade it. One of their comrades had been killed by hollows. Sakura didn't understand why they hadn't figured out the truth yet. Perhaps they were too caught up in their own pride to realize it. She took a seat at the end of the chairman's table, rudely putting her feet up on the table. The others didn't bat an eyelash at her behavior. They were too eager to get things done. There was a blackboard at the front of the room. Clearly they had been discussing tactics before she got here. Minato was leading the organization of this attack, and the entire association would be invading Hueco Mundo. That was hundreds of Shinigami, many of them talented. It was odd. When they were shinobi, they were used to sending out teams of no more than 5. Now they were leading a squad of many more numbers at the same time, and yet Minato was not being overwhelmed by having all of them at his command. They seemed to be almost done with their meeting, which meant that all that needed to be done now was the opening of the Garganta. And the 12th Division says they've pinpointed the location where Vulpes Sea is, or at least where he took the Konoha villagers many years ago. It is likely that the Hollow is not there anymore, nor is his army. Regardless, we should be able to find some clues as to their whereabouts once we reach Hueco Mundo. Minato explained. Question? Shikamaru asked, raising his hand. Yes, Shikamaru? Who will be participating in this invasion? Everyone. We are using the full force of the Konoha Association to invade Hueco Mundo and achieve our goals. The only one who will be absent from the attack shall be Sakura herself, who is to remain and perform the Garganta Kidu. Speaking of, he trailed off, leading into the next step of the planning. The final step. Sakura, are your preparations done? Are you prepared to lead us into Hueco Mundo, at the spot of Vulpes Sea's hideout? Minato asked. Sakura smiled deviously. The Garganta opened a portal on the sands of Hueco Mundo, and the 15 to 20 chairmen of the Konoha Association, as well as the lesser-seated and unseated Shinigami of the association, were deposited onto the desert sands on Hueco Mundo. It may have seemed like a low number, considering they were apt to take on the entirety of Hueco Mundo itself, but with their power, they could perhaps pull it off. Sakura had gotten the coordinates of the area correctly. They had been deposited outside of a very suspicious-looking palace, but the place looked fairly abandoned. Minato cleared his throat and turned to address the entire group. His riveting speeches had proven to unify the massive number of Shinigami in the past, and his skill as a captain meant he had the power to command them. Okay, everyone, we have reached our destination. This is the area where the Ryatsu samples have pointed to. This is the area where Vulpes C supposedly made his hideout. Looks more like a palace than a hideout to me, Minato. Jiraiya piped up from the front of the line, staring up at the palace. Minato grinned. Yeah, his hideout. However, we must be prepared for the possibility Vulpes C does not reside here anymore. Even if he does not, there may be some clues here so we can determine his true whereabouts. For now, enter the attack formation. The Shinigami of the Konoha Association cheered, their Zanpakutos thrust into the air in a battle cry. Minato turned around, as two members of the association opened the large gate barring their access to the palace. If Vulpes C was here, the security was very lax. When the gates were fully open, Minato directed the Shinigami in. Okay, let's go. In all honesty, they were prepared for anything in there. Vulpes C apparently had a ton of hollows underneath his command, which they had taken into account during their invasion plans. Go, go! Find the enemy! Kushina shouted from the back, directing the Shinigami inside the gates. When the last one had breached the area, she flashed over to her husband. I can tell already, this place is completely abandoned. That surprise attack worked for nothing. We're not going to find anything here, she commented. Minato looked contemplative. The Shinigami were milling around uncomfortably, seemingly looking for any enemy they could attack. Nothing sprouted up. What do you think we should do, Minato? Investigate the area? Jiraiya said, walking up to the husband and wife pair. Send us. We'll make sure to find any clues. Came a voice from the crowd, as Inuzuka Kiba emerged from the crowd of Shinigami, along with the two Hyuga cousins, as well as everyone else from his oldest son's generation. The Hyuga cousins had lost the ability to use the Byakugan, and Kiba didn't have Akamaru with him any longer, but they still were specialists in the tracking field. Minato looked around the group. Hinata, Kiba, Niji, Shikamaru, and Ino. The five of them were all ranked at various levels within their division, but that did not mean they were at the level of their rank. Rather, they were all vice-captain level or above, which meant that we're one of the most elite groups within the Konoha Association. Okay, you guys. That sounds conducive to the plan. Report back here immediately if you find anything worth checking out. We'll see if we can get a lead on Vulpes C's trail, Minato said. While the Konoha Association was searching for Vulpes C's trail within the Hueco Mundo, a gigantic portal had opened up in the skies above western Rakangai, directly near the Siriidii. It was the exact area where Ichigo and company had infiltrated Soul Society several years before. Incursion signal outside west wall. I repeat, incursion signal outside west wall. Soul Society is now on alert. A mandatory captains meeting will take place in approximately 10 minutes. All available captains report to the 1st Division barracks immediately. An alarm from within Siriidii sounded, which could be heard by the entirety of the Shinigami force. The gate fell as the portal widened above the skies of Soul Society, and 10 streaks of light rocketed from the depths of the portal, crashing to earth into western Rakangai. Shinigami ran to and fro after they heard the announcement of the incursion, filling out their various duties as the captains flocked to the barracks of the 1st Division. Meanwhile, the citizens of Rakangai, the normal souls, gathered around the site of the impact, watching it warily as the dust began to clear. Naruto stretched his arms, getting the kinks out of him as he climbed out of the hole first. The other Espada took a few more moments. So this is Soul Society, huh? Although we have a few secret outposts here, I've never actually been. Doesn't seem like a very nice place, does it? He said to himself, as the people began to crowd around him. What's going on? Who are you guys? A brave man asked, approaching Naruto as he got out of the crater, taking in his odd clothing and the mask fragment on his face. Naruto stared at him as if he were stupid, a condescending grin on his face and bloodshot eyes. Quick as a flash, he drew his Zanpakuto and cleaved off the man's legs from underneath him, allowing him to crumple out on the ground and bleed to death from his stumps of legs. These guys aren't even close to being Shinigami, Naruto noted, sheathing his Zanpakuto as Ulquiorra and the other Espada climbed out of the crater themselves. Of course not. We are in Rakangai at the moment. The Suriidii would be over there. Ulquiorra commented, pointing to the area where there was an enormous gate blocking the way. That would be the gate? It's made of Seki stone, so we'll have to open it. Fortunately, we have more than enough muscle to take care of that, so no problems. Once it's open, we call the rest of the force. So, let's go. Naruto led the charge, as the other 9 Espada fell into step behind him, casually walking up to the gate. A large shadow fell over them, and all 10 of them looked up, unimpressed, as an enormous man leapt over the wall and crashed down in front of them, creating a large shockwave. Oh? Ryoka? Haven't had any unauthorized intruders since the incident with the Ichigo boy. But no matter, the fact that you're here means you seek access to Suriidii without a pass. Since it's my job to deal with unauthorized intruders, I, Jidenbu, will stop you here, the giant said, pulling out 2 axes from his coat. We're fighting already? Baragon piped up. Naruto still looked unimpressed. I guess so. Yami, take care of this, will you? And when you're done, open the gate for us as well. Naruto ordered. Yami flexed his muscles, ripping his Arrancar robe slightly. You got it, the Decimus said, taking the forefront, while the others backed off. You're up first, eh? Then you'll be the first to go, Shrimpy, Jidenbu said. Hey, no one's call me Shrimpy to my face, fat ass. You're just asking to die, Yami shouted back, pounding his fists together. Jidenbu swung his giant axe to the side in a great display of strength, trying to crush Yami where he stood. Yami just clenched his fist in response, throwing a punch forward to meet the axe. The axe impacted Yami's fist, and it didn't even come close to breaking through his hierro. Rather, Yami pressed the attack, shattering the axes into a million pieces. Why? Impossible, Jidenbu said. Ichigo had shattered the blades before, but he still had the handles. This guy straight up obliterated his axes, to the point of no return. You don't have time to mourn over your weapons, Yami shouted, charging up a Siro in his fists. He shot it upward, and Jidenbu screamed as the blast engulfed him, burning a lethal hole in his torso. Jidenbu flopped uselessly against the gate, blood pouring from his wound as his thrashes got weaker and weaker. With the gatekeeper out of the wall, Yami grabbed the bottom of the gate with one hand, and threw it up with so much force that it jammed and got stuck open. Minato-sama! Minato turned around as he heard a heavily breathing voice get closer to him. Kiba was rushing up to him as fast as he could go, a sign that he apparently had news for him. The other members of the search party were also running up from behind, though not as quickly as Kiba was. What it is, you guys? Have you found anything? Kiba caught his breath really quick, gasping for air. This was important news. We've found people, Kiba announced to his leader, and Minato raised an eyebrow. What do you mean you've found people? Are they Arrancar? Minato asked. That was the most obvious explanation, because Arrancar were humanoid most of the time. No. They're not Arrancar. One of them seems to be a Shinigami, and the other seems to be a human. You have to come with us. We'll show you where they are, Kiba said. Lead the way. Minato agreed, motioning to the other leaders of the group to follow them, while ordering the lower-ranking members of the association to stand idle. Kiba brought the group to what seemed to be an abandoned arena within the confines of the palace. Minato didn't realize that sporting events were held within Hueco Mundo, but he got the feeling that he wouldn't like whatever he found in there. Rin was darting her eyes around to and fro, apparently looking at the architecture of the building. Minato had to admit that it was well made, as he walked into the main part of the arena. The bleachers were currently above him, and they had made their way down onto the floor of the arena, where the games would take place, apparently. Indeed, There were in fact two people here, who had apparently made this place a temporary home of sorts. But they weren't just ordinary people. Minato recognized them immediately. You're Kurosaki Ichigo," Minato commented, noticing that the boy hadn't changed a day from over 10 years ago. Beside him was a grown woman of around 26, but he easily recognized her as Inoue Oriheim. "And Inoue Oriheim, what are you two doing here?" Minato asked incredulously, as both humans looked at them for the first time. Ichigo was the first to speak. It took him a little while to remember, seeing as he squinted his eyes for a few seconds, but it clicked with him before long. "Minato-san? Kushina-san? And all of you guys?" he said, recognizing a few of them within the group, such as Shikamaru. A few other members recognized him back, and they talked amongst themselves for a second. "Kurosaki-san, how long have you been here?" "Oh, I see. It's been so long since we invaded Las Noches. I mean, Kakashi-san died in the invasion, so you must have assumed that I did as well, seeing that I did not make it back. I got stranded in Hueco Mundo all those years ago, when all of my friends died, and have been trying to eke out an existence ever since," Ichigo explained. The company's eyes softened significantly. "Well, we can take you back, Ichigo, when we have finished up our business here. We were all hurt deeply by Kakashi's death, but at least there is one survivor from that day. But right now, we are on official business, tracking down the one who destroyed Konoha." Kushina piped up. "Konoha, that's the village you all lived in while you were alive, correct?" Oriheim said, joining into the conversation. Minato nodded. "Yes, it was destroyed a long time ago. We have a culprit, but we never figured out just how it was destroyed or what happened to the villages, hence part of the reason for our invasion," Minato explained. "This may sound strange," Ichigo added, "but while we were living here, we met someone from Konoha, and we, at least somewhat learned what happened to it." The company perked up at that, and Minato pressured. "You mean there was someone from Konoha who was still alive? Where are they now?" Minato asked. "It's probably best I take this one from the top. We arrived here a few days ago on our vagabond, and almost immediately discovered that this place," he patted the ground, "was a trapdoor. We managed to open the thing, but when we did, this girl crawled out of the hole. She was covered in blood and completely insane, and I could only understand pieces of what she was saying. Apparently she was taken there and held against her will, but she talked about killing creatures or something a lot too. After that, she took my sword when my guard was down and killed herself almost instantly," Ichigo admitted. They could tell that he was fairly torn up over the whole thing. The company deflated, but Minato had one final thing to ask Ichigo. "Did she mention anything about who did this to her, and where that hollow might be?" Minato asked, a dangerous tone in his voice. Reignited feelings of anger burst forth, and he was prepared to possibly find the culprit. Ichigo thought about that for a moment, closing his eyes and thinking. She did repeat this one name over and over. Said something about how he put her down there, and I don't know, but there was something about him that linked her capture and the strange creatures she mentioned. Minato felt a bead of sweat roll down his face. "What was the name? Was it Vulpes C?" "No, it wasn't a code name or anything like that," he trailed off. "I believe the name was Naruto? This could be a sign of invasion. We must not forget the Ryoka incident of 10 years ago. Although we gained a powerful ally, that was also the most devastating invasion of the century, excluding Aizen's war. We must not let our guard down." Yamamoto riveted, as he held the captain's meeting with 10 of the 13 current captains. Yamamoto was about to continue, but there was a crash in the distance, jolting the captain's attention, and an alarm went off almost immediately after the fact. "Emergency alert! Emergency alert! Invaders within the Siriidii. I repeat, invaders within the Siriidii. All squads, take defensive positions. I repeat, take defensive positions." "What the?" Kuraka said. "Ryoka?" Kenpachi commented, seeming a little excited. "So we are being invaded. That renders this captain's meeting pointless. I'm dismissing all of you here. Return to your divisions and take defensive wartime measures. Also, due to the current absence of 3rd Division Captain Uzumaki Kushina, 5th Division Captain Namikaze Minato, and 9th Division Captain Jiraiya, as well as the entire Konoha Association, I am nulling the restriction on Zanpakuto to release for Captain Class personnel. All those who are Captain Class are to consider this invasion with special wartime procedures. That is all. Yamamoto banged his staff, bringing an end to the meeting as the captains filed out of the barracks. The war had begun. After Yami had outright jammed the western gate on its hinges, Naruto gave out a sharp whistle. As soon as he did that, another portal, identical to the last one, opened directly above their heads. Naruto then turned to the rest of the Espada. I've given the invasion force the order to slaughter any Shinigami they come across, but have ordered them to flee on sight should they encounter a captain. Defeating the captains is our first priority, and should be limited to the members of the Espada. Slaughter every Shinigami you come across, but search for the captains at all times, and crush them. Okiura. Naruto motioned to his right hand, who brought out a stack of papers and handed them to Naruto. Naruto flipped through them for a few seconds, before pulling one out and showing it to the group. 1st Division Captain Enso Taishu, Yamamoto Genryu Saishi Gakuni. If you encounter him, flee on sight. I will be the one to hunt him down. Also, he flipped through the papers again. 5th Division Captain Namikaze Minato. You may engage the target if you wish, but you will leave him alive and in suitable fighting condition. Everyone else is fair game for all of you. Keep that in mind. Naruto explained. The Espada nodded at their commander. Once you have defeated a captain, you will be moved on to stage 2 of the plan. You will find their key, and bring it to the Tsukioku Hill at the end of the invasion. Naruto explained, before he walked ahead of the group and inside the Suriidai. Arrancar were beginning to spill out of the portal, ready to invade as well. Some low-ranked Shinigami had already come to meet them, their swords out and at the ready. Naruto grinned, before he fired a quick zero on all of them, tracing the beam across each of their heads. When it was over, around 10 or so Shinigami lay dead in front of them, the first casualties of the war. I'll leave you guys here. Begin the attack! Naruto shouted. Chapter 51, Scientias. The Espada flashed out of existence as soon as Naruto gave his order, preparing to go to their own random direction within the Suriidai, searching for a captain to hunt. Arrancar poured into the Suriidai through the open gate, mowing down any Shinigami who would dare get in their way. It made sense in a way. The average Shinigami was pitifully weak, something an average Arrancar and his army would have no trouble dispatching of. He had left the force of regular hollows on standby for now. They would come into play during stage 2 of the plan. I'd best get in on some of this action myself. Naruto noted before he flashed away, much like the other Espada. With the crowd of Arrancar closing in, the normal Shinigami would never be able to pick him out as their leader. As he used Sonido to get up on the rooftops, he noticed that a few fires had already been started within Suriidai. There was a loud crash, and a building a distance away collapsed from under him. He heard laughing, and Yami jumped onto the roof, reveling in the destruction he caused to a few dead Shinigami. He was firing bala from the rooftop, before he jumped in the air to levitate there as a swing from a Zanpakuto almost caught him. He hung up and spammed more bala. Figures that he would be the one to make him the most noticeable, but when he looked down on the street directly below him, he saw Grimmjow, effortlessly slashing through Shinigami who were running to and fro, trying to make sense of the unexpected invasion while fulfilling their duties. Hurry, it's a Ryoka! Kill it! Don't let him escape! The Shinigami cried. Naruto scoffed. Like any of them could be able to match Grimmjow in speed. They should be running away right now, not trying to engage their target. They might have lived longer. Can this even be called a Ryoka invasion? There are so many Arrancar attacking. Another one cried before Grimmjow bisected him down the middle, as other Shinigami began to get discouraged. It doesn't matter. Defend the Suriidai. Lay down your lives if you have to. A particularly zealous Shinigami said somewhere down there. Before long, he was killed as well. Naruto moved away from the scene as he heard cries of pain as their lives were cut short. He had a Sotaisha to find, but first, he would engage on a little fun himself. He hoped he could find someone, anyone he had known from Konoha before he made his way to the First Division. He could kill random Shinigami all day long and be satisfied with his work, but what he really longed for was someone from Konoha to battle with. And kill, he couldn't forget kill. Like Grimmjow, he himself descended into the streets, as Shinigami ran every direction. Ones who were near enough to him all stopped when he randomly appeared in front of them, his hands in his pockets. "Tell me," he said dangerously all of a sudden, to the group of Shinigami. "Do you know where I can find anyone from Konoha?" He asked the Shinigami who were warily approaching him. Something clicked within their heads, and they drew their Zanpakutos. "What do you want with Minato-sama, Ryoka scum?" asked one of the Shinigami, Minato being the forefront person from Konoha who came to their minds. Naruto picked up on that. "Minato-sama?" Naruto mocked incredulously. "You really worship that asshole around here, don't you?" "Shut up. Minato-sama is a great man. Greater than you'll ever be, Ryoka," another Shinigami pointed out. "I don't care about that, but it's clear that you're not going to tell me where he nor anyone from Konoha is. I'm done with you people now," he said, drawing his Zanpakuto. Within an instant, he had cut down all of the Shinigami in front of him. They cried out in pain as they flopped to the ground uselessly, and in just a moment blood had covered the streets like a puddle from their combined wounds, soaking Naruto's sandals in the liquid. He launched a quick bala at another Shinigami who was rushing at him from afar, and quickly sidestepped and punched a hole in a Shinigami who was looking to attack him from behind. Now, where is the old fart? Naruto asked himself. The most obvious solution would be at the First Division's headquarters, but to be sure he focused in on his pesquisa, trying to find the strongest Ryatsu within Soul Society. He could even sense a little bit of residual Ryatsu. He knew where his espada were around the Soul Society, but he wondered if the people who came here from Konoha had a different Ryatsu, one that he could pick out. For now, he just hoped he would bump into one person from Konoha. If he found one, he could find the rest. Seo was out of his element here. He wasn't used to going to war, to actually be on the front lines fighting a battle. He had no fraction with him, and no time to prepare the usage of any of his nasty inventions. He flipped through the copy of the catalog that Naruto had given him on the way Soul Society works, and from the first instance he knew which division and which captain he was going to target. The 12th Division, and Kuratsuchi Mayuri Taishu. Mayuri was a scientist like him, and it was clear to him that he probably thought in a similar way when it came to battle at least. He preferred to take action from the sidelines, using his intelligence and preparation of traps to win. Yet, the 12th Division's captain didn't have any information on Naruto's Arrancar force yet, which meant that he was also unable to prepare for the incident. He had studied the intricacies of Soul Society well before coming here. He would skip the barracks of the 12th Division and head straight for the Shinigami Research and Development Bureau, straight into the lab. Kuratsuchi Mayuri would most likely be there. The Novena picked around a corner, eyeing the entrance to the bureau itself, and the several labs that lie within its depths. There were no guards stationed outside. Most likely they were off fulfilling other orders in wake of the invasion. Seriously, they leave one of the most important areas in Suriidii unguarded at a time like this. Next they'll leave the medical wing unprotected. But this works in favor for me. While Seo contemplated how he was going to do things, the interior of the lab was a war zone itself. Researchers of the division were at monitors, madly screaming numbers and data at the top of their lungs as they attempted to find the Ryatsu signals of Arrancar. The alarm was going off as the researchers picked up red and blue blips on their radar, showing the invasion in many different areas. We've picked up 14 Arrancar near the 7th Division's barracks. One of them is really going wild over there, it looks like. It's of a crimson color. The rest are colored blue. Shit, how many are there? The third seat Akon said. He reached over to yell at Rin. Rin, what's the status on the perimeter outside the bureau itself? He ordered to the young man seated at the monitor in the corner, who seemingly wasn't paying attention until he got yelled at by his superior. Yes, sir. There seems to be. He ate his words as a blip of crimson light showed itself on his monitor. Wait, we've got one! There's an errand car directly outside the bureau, colored crimson. It's in. Rain was cut off, as the wall of the lab was suddenly carved apart from the outside, throwing the researchers off and creating even more tension within the room. The section of wall that had been cut apart suddenly fell, crushing several researchers as well as snapping the cords to several of their tracking monitors that they were using to locate the errand car. Well, it seems that your captain isn't here at the moment. No matter, my assignment is also to kill any Shinigami I come across, and I also want to take a look for myself on the strides Soul Society has made on science. Though, he looked around the room, as the researchers got out of their seats, and warily backed away from Sale. It seems that there's nothing of importance within this room, which means I can fight here without really harming anything of value. If I could get to your captain's specimen room though, then it would a different story. But for now, I'm afraid you guys are going to be the sacrificial deaths to draw your captain out of hiding. Ta-ta, Sale said. Quick, get Kuratsuchi Taisha. Akon shouted at a random researcher. Sale gave Akon a seductive smirk, placing one of his gloved hands on the hilt of his sword, drawing his Zanpakuto. With a quick flash, Sale intercepted the researcher, cleaving him down the chest while also destroying several monitors and chairs directly behind. Akon and several other researchers winced at both their dead comrade and the destroyed equipment, before Sale turned to them. You are so predictable. How did you even become qualified researchers? If you worked for me, well, let's just say you'd all have been turned into edible fraction by now. Not that I don't do that even with my valuable subordinates. Sale mused, flicking his Zanpakuto across another row of monitors. The researchers backed away. You are all so very droll, and I'm not much of a fighter, mind. I think I'll finish up with you quickly, and then focus my other efforts on finding your captain. I'm particularly interested in dealing with him, you see, chatted Sale casually. But first, he trailed off, holding his Zanpakuto to his mouth before opening it. Sip. He shoved the blade down his throat. For Nicaras. I understand. I will head out to battle. That was the voice of Kuchiki Baikuya, who was sitting in his office completing a report on the Ryoka invasion. A messenger kneeled in front of him, relaying the message that all captains were now required out on the battlefield. Shinigami were being slaughtered in massive amounts of numbers, and the purpose to the Ryoka's invasion had not yet been determined. Unfortunately, Kuchiki Taishu, we are currently missing 3 captains as well as several of Soul Society's greatest fighters. The Kido Corps is also currently missing its leader, so they cannot take action at the moment as well. To compensate, the remaining 10 captains must take on the duties of all the missing divisions, and efficiently run Suriidi's defensive tactics. This is a direct order from 1st Division Captain and Captain Commander of the Godai 13, Yamamoto Genryusai Shigakuni, the messenger also explained. The Kido Corps is inactive. Haruno Taishu rarely takes action with her division, but during a wartime crisis even she must have been ordered to join the battle. If I may inquire as to the business of the Kido Corps? Byakuya asked. Yes, sir. Apparently, with her creation of the Garganta-based Kido that allowed the Konoha Association to invade Hueco Mundo, she has been promoted. She is currently undergoing a ceremony within the Ryokyu to be promoted to the Royal Guard. Byakuya sighed. And such an event had to happen on a truly momentous occasion. A pity, he said distantly, as he dismissed the messenger, standing up from his desk. Kuchiki Taisha, one of Byakuya's subordinates, barged into the office, covered in blood. Byakuya was just finishing strapping his Zanpakuto to his hip. The 6th Division is under attack. 4 soldiers have died within the 5th district, he cried, falling to his knees. Byakuya remained stoic. I am aware. I have felt the Ryatsu blanketing this place for several minutes. I am about to head out myself, and engage the enemy. You relayed this order to the rest of the division. Have Groups 3 and 6 go support the 13th Division, and Groups 2 and 5 are to engage with any enemy contact around the vicinity of the 6th Division's barracks, he ordered. Yes, sir. The Shinigami saluted. Byakuya had felt that Ryatsu. Rinji was at the vice-captain's meeting, but it was far beyond what anyone in his division could handle. He had already felt 4 Ryatsus vanish under it, members of his own division. Before Byakuya could even exit his own office, a Shinigami, split cleanly in two, flew into the room and splattered against the far wall directly behind Byakuya's desk, staining the wall with blood. "Yo, I take it you're the big shot captain around here?" came a loud, raucous voice, exactly the polar opposite of Byakuya. Byakuya put his hand on the hilt of his Zanpakuto. A figure walked up to directly underneath the doorway, and randomly slashed off the top half of the wall above the door, apparently so he could fit in the room. The first thing Byakuya noticed about him was that he was very tall. So tall he could barely fit in the office without hitting his head on the ceiling. He lugged around a bizarre Zanpakuto, double-bladed sides that looked very much like the crescent moon. "Sup, I'm the Sexta Espada, Neutra Gilga." Byakuya clinged on to a few facets of that introduction. One was the number. Sexta. The sixth Espada out of 10, according to Soul Society's very limited information on the Espada. Not exactly a low number within the group, but by no means high. The other thing he focused on was more important. Espada? You mean like the top 10 Arrancar that followed Aizen? Soul Society assumed that your organization disappeared when Aizen was defeated. I didn't realize that you still operated without a leader. Neutra scoffed. As if a bitch-ass Shinigami could ever be our leader. Ever since Aizen died, we had a new leader, though we've always sort of followed him regardless even when Aizen was in control. But enough about us, let's talk about you, Neutra said, pointing his crescent blade at Byakuya. Ever since I got here, it's been nothing but wusses, wimps, and pussies. No one here has been able to give me even remotely a good fight. But you's a captain, ain't ya? That means that you're the cream of the crop here in Soul Society. Maybe you could give me the fight I'm looking for? Neutra inquired, licking his lips and showing off his sixth tattoo. Filth. Byakuya muttered in disdain, drawing his Zanpakuto and getting into a full ready position. You are clearly an enemy. You have shown your true colors when you cowardly invaded and shed blood within our court. What's important here is not that you can get a fight out of this, but rather that you are crushed with the shortest amount of effort and time available at my disposal. Arrancar, he finished. Neutra smirked. That so? Well, don't think it's going to be that easy. Shinigami. Neutra released his heavy Ryatsu, and Byakuya's eyes widened as it blanketed the area and Neutra swung his Zanpakuto within the narrow office. The building collapsed in on itself from the powerful blow, before two figures climbed out of the rubble during the aftereffects. Byakuya took up footing on a nearby roof, while Neutra watched him from down below on the street. You show no restraint, Arrancar. That will be your downfall. Neutra didn't say anything, instead just opting to swing his blade around, crashing it into the building that Byakuya was standing on. Kuraka! Yukite cried, as he flash-stepped his way inside the 8th Division, and inside Kuraka Shunsui's personal quarters. Kuraka himself was lounged upon the roof of the building, looking solemnly at the destruction that Siriidii was undergoing. Yukite? What are you doing lying around? Why aren't you preparing for battle? Yukite asked. Kuraka sighed. Nanao-chan already fulfilled the necessary orders and mobilized the division, even before she went on to the vice-captain's meeting. She's really a hard worker, she is, and so organized. There's nothing for me to do in the meantime. Going out and searching for someone to fight on my own doesn't really sit well with me, so I'm just contemplating the phenomenon of war, and how we are dragged into it yet again, he explained casually. Even still, there are Shinigami down there dying, the least you could do is... No need to waste our time chasing down average Arrancar. We've caught ourselves a big fish already, so there's no need to do anything. Kuraka explained, seemingly noticing a presence for the first time. Yukite noticed it a mere seconds after Kuraku, as an Arrancar entered the area that the two captains were standing in. An Arrancar? Yukite said in surprise. Not just any Arrancar. Have you felt her Ryatsu? It's pretty strong. I'm going to have my work cut out for me on this one. It's a woman. Yukite outright sweat dropped. Are you sure you're going to be able to do this? He asked, his faith in Kuraku apparently very low. Kuraka wasn't fazed. Normally, I don't like the thought of fighting women. But then again, I don't like the thought of fighting at all. But sometimes you have to force yourself to do things that you really don't want to do. Kuraka picked up his 2 Zanpakuto, as Harribel stared up at the 2 senior captains on the roof. Kuraka flashed down to meet her, a soft smile on his face. Well, we have a lovely young lady that has come to meet me. It must be my lucky day, Kuraka said, as Harribel regarded him calmly. Yukitake smacked his hand to his forehead, exasperated by Kuraka's wily antics. It didn't help that Harribel wore quite the provocative outfit to boot. Harribel neither reacted with anger nor disdain at Kuraka's greeting. In fact, she didn't react to him at all. It was almost like he wasn't there to her, and to him it was like he was talking to a brick wall. Hello? Kuraka asked, a little confused by the lack of response. Now it was Harribel's time to look at him with disdain. You're one of the 13 captains of Siriidii. Somehow I'm pretty disappointed, she said, not bothering to hide the condescension that was in her voice. But she placed her finger on the edge of the hilt of her Zanpakuto, slipping it through the loop and flipping it out of its sheath. She twirled it around before catching it, the odd hollow sword looking useless for battle, even though it was deadly in the wielder's hands. Regardless, you are a member of the 13 elite Shinigami. I will have to crush you with full force, she said, at Kuraka. Man, I got one who's just so eager to fight. Unfortunately, I can't just sit around and chat with a lovely lady this time either, no matter how much I would like to. Kuraka paused. And I just hate getting cut up. Harribel didn't give him any time to talk after that. Rather, she charged up yellow Ryatsu into the hollow part of his sword, and used Sonito to get underneath her opponent's guard and slam her powered-up Zanpakuto across his face. Kuraka grunted and desperately drew both of Zanpakutos at the side, crossing them over each other to block the strong attack from Harribel. He grinned awkwardly. And I get the feeling I'm gonna get cut up a lot here. Yukitake watched from his vantage point on the roof. The girl was strong, very, very strong. Much stronger than he would have ever expected an Ehrenkar to be. Aren't you gonna help him? Of course not. 2-on-1 isn't very fair, and Kuraka seems to be doing just fine on his own. Whatever, I don't really care, said the strange voice from beside Yukitake. Yukitake seemed to notice for the first time that he was talking to someone who shouldn't have been there, and he bounced from his seat as he saw 2 Ehrenkar, one that looked like an adult man, and another that looked like a preteen girl, sitting right next to him. How'd you get here? Yukitake asked. Well, I'm supposed to be going around killing people and looking for some key, but I don't really like that kind of stuff. I was hoping to just take it easy while I watch one of the others do their thing, Stark said. And it's because of that crap that you got demoted. You keep up that lazy attitude and you'll get kicked out of the Espada altogether, Lillinet said from behind him, smacking Stark in the back of the head, making him grunt as he fell flat on his face. That might be what I want at this point, but I can't ask for another demotion or anything, Stark responded. Lillinet continued to yell at him, while Yukitake stood there watching the scene, completely perplexed. You're in Espada? Unfortunately. Then who's leading this attack? Aizen is dead. You don't need to worry about that right now. I would go and help your friend if I were you. I may not want to fight or anything, but all of my comrades do, including her. He pointed down towards Harribel, who was clashing with Kuraka. She's strong. That Captain San isn't going to last very long. That's okay, Kuraka is strong too, but the question is if you're really going to remain idle, Yukitake said, slightly suspicious. Stark laid his head into the roof of the building. Fine. If you really want to fight, then that's the way it's going to be, he said, climbing to his feet and stretching before yawning. Lillinet, don't run off and do your own thing. Stay out of range, and if I need you, I will call, Stark said completely seriously, facing Yukitake while placing his hand on his Zanpakuto. Fine. I got it, Lillinet said, just as serious as Stark, backing away from the powerful opponents. Yukitake didn't look pleased, or excited, or even angry at Stark. I need to ask you something. Of all the Ehrenkar I've met, most of them are petty, rude, sadistic, and cruel. Neither you nor the girl down there seem like any of those things. And yet your group is ransacking Soul Society. Why are you doing this? Stark's expression didn't change. I don't believe that's any of your business, Stark said, as his Zanpakuto was drawn fully out of its sheath. Yukitake meanwhile was looking cautiously at Lilinet, like he didn't feel he could fight with her around. I'm not going to send her away, you know. She can handle herself in a fight, Stark said, noting his discomfort. While that exchange was occurring, Harribel and Kuraka continued to duel down below. Without ever turning away from the battle, Kuraka noticed Stark. Where'd that guy come from? I guess it doesn't matter, but did I hear that girl mention something about the Espada? Those 10 Arrancar who were the elite of Aizen's forces? I take that silence as a yes, Kuraka said cheekily. There are 10 of you, and 2 of them have come to see us. You seem powerful, if I'm to be honest, but I can tell that you're not the ones leading their operation. If I had to guess, I'd say that the guy up there is number 2. His eyes trailed up for a second as there was a lull in the battle. Because I'm going to guess that you're number 3, you know? He finished, looking at Harribel. Harribel didn't respond or even say anything to him, instead placing her hand on her very short zipper. If it was any other time than an invaded Soul Society, the slightly perverted captain would get a little excited at what Harribel was about to do, but as is, his expression didn't change in the slightest. She completely unzipped her already short top, revealing her mask fragments, which covered the bottom half of her face, her neck, and the top part of her breasts. On the bottom half of her right breast, a small 5 was tattooed there. That seemed to surprise Kuraka somewhat. Number 5, huh? That's not what I was expecting, really. With your skills, I thought you would at least be a little higher ranked than that, but I was wrong. I guess it goes to show that your army isn't one to be messed with, he commented. Really? This is hardly my full power right now. If I'm fighting with all my strength, you will know, Harribel commented. Kuratsuchi Taishu. A researcher of the 12th Division cried for his captain, as a purple ink-like substance splashed onto him. The researcher cried out in alarm as a clone of him grew from where the substance splattered against him. What is this? He screamed. He wasn't the only one who was afraid of the inky material. All of the living, remaining researchers in the room balked as they were hit by the substance, clones of them popping out every which way. At a closer glance, they could tell differences between each other. The carbon clones of all the researchers had no pupils, along with bizarre symbols around their eyes. Be careful. We don't know what they're capable of yet, Akon shouted above the din, staring across at 3 clones of his own. Thankfully, Zanpakuto weren't allowed in the lab, but not even Kuratsuchi Mayuri could take away their Kidu. Then again, no one really knew if the clones could copy their abilities yet. Akon grit his teeth in frustration, looking to where the cause of all their problems was. The Arrancar that had invaded was sitting atop of the main monitor in the room, and Akon could tell he was a lot different than before, and a lot more disgusting too. Akon had never personally seen an Arrancar's release, and after this display he hoped to never see one again. And that was something coming from a researcher like him. He was supposed to be used to things that made lesser people squeamish. He had released his Zanpakuto in an interesting way, but his release was over now, and he was fully in his resurrection. His Arrancar robe had changed. The top half disappeared to become a hard lavender material that seemed to be armor, while the bottom half of his robes became stained with a strange purple material. His mask fragments had changed from the glasses he wore to be a band across his forehead, which curled under his left eye while connecting to shell-like plates over his ears. 4 wings were jutting from his back, each of them dripping a repulsive red tendril. Similar purple tendrils were found on Sale's fingertips, forearms, and on the ends of his hair. He had sprayed the black liquid from his back, and seemed to be able to manipulate it at will. You like that? Ever since I've undergone training, I've been able to manipulate my excretions at will. Let's see how you enjoy fighting yourselves while I sit back and watch. He laughed. Akon cringed as a clone of himself fired a blast of Kidu, destroying a monitor behind him as Akon dodged. The clone reached into his robe, pulling out a number of scalpels. All around him, clones of other researchers were doing the same. Shit, I forgot. We're not completely unarmed around here in the first place, Akon thought, as he dodged a thrown scalpel. Another unlucky researcher got pinned to the wall by about a dozen scalpels. Third seat Akon. What do? We can't fight him, the researcher who had been pinned to the wall exclaimed. Seo watched boredly as he struggled. At least give a little more energy when you resist. It's a little boring killing someone when they don't even scream in agony, Seo commented, still not getting up from his perch. Rin, get to the door. Forget the punishment later. I will take full responsibility. Just get Kuratsuchi Taishu out of his specimen lab and alert him to the situation. Hurry! Akon shouted at Rin, who was in the far corner of the room. He was the only one of the researchers who had not been cloned yet. I don't think I can do that at the moment, senpai, he said, cowering. Rin, you little bastard, another well-built researcher pointed out. Now's not the time for that, Rin. Get over there and alert Kuratsuchi Taishu. That's an order, Akon said, this time much more forcefully. That seemed to kick Rin into shape. Yes, sir, Rin shouted, forcing himself to move from his hiding spot. Seo watched him with a slight amount of interest, like he was pondering something. The captain of this division seems to be in the vicinity, though if he joins the fight now things could get a little difficult. Should I allow him to alert his captain, or take care of all of them first? Seo pondered. Seo seemed to decide on something, and shot out one of his wings that heading straight towards Rin. Rin saw it coming, and froze in his tracks, looking at the oncoming attack like a deer in headlights. Another researcher got in front of Rin, using his body and a tiny scalpel to try and keep the tendril from attacking Rin. However, Seo didn't wrap the researcher in his wings, but instead just lightly tapped him before pulling it back. He hissed in annoyance as he missed his intended target, but one of the red tendrils on his wings began to swell. He touched it lightly, and the tendril spit out a small doll, similar in appearance to the researcher he just touched. Seo took the doll in his hand and placed it in his back pocket for the time being. He threw out his arms in a wide, flamboyant display, allowing all four of his wings to shoot forward. More researchers put themselves between Rin and Seo, even as the tendrils touched them, and Seo drew back to create more and more dolls that he could control. Finally, only Akon and Rin were the only ones in the room not under Seo's control. Before long, Seo had pockets filled with voodoo dolls, but he wasn't concerned about that. He shot out his wings one last time. Rin was just about to make it to the other part of the lab, but then his entire world went dark. Are you going, Mayuri-sama? Kuratsuchi Nimiya asked. Mayuri was hunched over something, reaching into a crawl space while seemingly pulling something out of nowhere. Of course. Arankar are invading Soul Society. For once in my life, specimens are actually coming to me rather than me going to them. It is the perfect opportunity to pick up some intriguing specimens for my lab, he said, clutching his Zanpakuto in his hands. Mayuri looked over to his right, where the door led to his specimen lab. Hopefully he would be able to stock up on something new. He turned back to the main monitor, the central database of the entire institution. Nimue, you're going to come with me in case I need a decoy. I'll leave Akon in charge of the entire facility, he ordered, attaching his Zanpakuto in the very odd place that he kept it. Yes, Mayuri-sama. Before either of them could move one step, the door to Mayuri's quarters burst open. Mayuri sneered at the blatant disrespect that one of his underlings was showing, but he eerily and calmly watched as Rin stepped into the room. Kuratsuchi-sama, we are under attack, Rin said, with a surprisingly emotionless and hollow voice. Mayuri pondered what he should do, but surprisingly he didn't blow up at the young Shinigami. I see. And why did you interrupt me over such a minor detail? Mayuri asked him. Rin said nothing in response, keeping his same blank expression and mannerisms. Out of nowhere, Rin pulled a scalpel out of his back pocket, preparing to strike Mayuri with it. However, Mayuri had seen this coming for a long time, and before Rin could do anything he had stabbed him straight in the stomach with his sealed Zanpakuto. Seriously? Did they think they could fool me with this? Mayuri commented out loud, as the clone burst into black liquid. Mayuri didn't look surprised. He could spot the differences from a mile away. There was that symbol around his eyes, the lack of pupils, and the overall emotionless demeanor. He threw the door open a little wider with a great amount of force, walking through 2 more unoccupied labs before picking up on a few sounds. There was definitely a battle going on, though no one had bothered to alert him. Didn't they know they were supposed to tell him if their division is under attack? Never mind the enter and I'll kill you sign that was always posted above his own personal lab. He hissed as he threw open the door to the lab where Sale had taken up residence. Strewn across the floor were the dead bodies of many of his underlings, including the Ryorin and Akon. The only living thing in the room was the Arrancar sitting in the center, wings folded as he waited patiently. Neither Mayuri nor Ninyu paid any attention to the bodies, or how horrifically killed they were. Some of them were bleeding in peculiar places, like they had their organs ruptured without any physical trauma. Sale had one last scientist crushed in his wings, before he let him go, flopping to the ground uselessly. He eyed the new arrival, taking special note of the Haori that adorned him. Mayuri stared him down back, and a sinister smile spread across his face. Sale actually had a light frown on his face, as Mayuri fondled his Zanpakuto. Arrancar, he hissed. A captain. The 12th Division's captain, huh? I've been waiting to flush you out, but I always figured it wouldn't be that easy. Really? I've been looking to head out for a while now, and see if I can find any interesting specimens. And I must say, you look particularly interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anyone who was able to kill in such a manner. It makes me truly wonder how you did it. Mayuri commented, to Sale's disinterest. One of his wings was fidgeting. Too bad you won't be able to take me as a specimen. It's a shame, I myself would like to get a Shinigami captain in my research lab, but I'm afraid I'm under strict orders to kill whoever I encounter. You're going to die here, Kuratsuchi Mayuri. Sale shouted. You have a rather bland personality, don't you? Though it seems that you are the scientific equivalent of the Arrancar, considering you came here first, and seem to have an interest in research. Though, you have destroyed much valuable equipment within my division, so I'm afraid I can't let that slide. I'll be taking you in now, with the method that requires the least amount of effort. Mayuri said, drawing his Zanpakuto. Rip. Ashisoji Jaizu. Sale's eyes narrowed as the captain released his shurikai, which turned into a bizarre, golden trident with a baby-like face near its bottom. At first glance, Sale couldn't figure out what it did. But the information he had on Mayuri's shurikai told him that Ashisoji Jaizu's shurikai was a type of paralysis. Sale sent out his wings towards the captain, but withdrew when Mayuri sliced his Zanpakuto forward. It wouldn't do to get it paralyzed. He predicted Mayuri's straight pattern, before moving his wing to the side to try and get Mayuri from a different angle. Mayuri looked at the oncoming wing, jumping back a little bit as he halted his attack. He pulled on his mechanical ear, drawing the blade out from its socket and twirling it at the oncoming wing. It sliced off one of the tendrils, allowing a purple liquid to spurt forth from the severed tendril. Shit! Mayuri said, as the liquid actually shot from the severed tendril and splattered all over the place in an unexpected attack. He used Shunpa to get around all over the globs of liquid, but he was kept distracted by that one thing. While Mayuri was busy dodging, Sale appeared directly behind him. However, before he could attack Mayuri, Nimi got between the two. While he managed to touch both of them with one of his wings, Mayuri actually finished dodging and got ready to counterattack, slashing at Sale's shoulder just as the dolls of both of them were being formed. Blood gushed from Sale's wound as he cursed and withdrew. The tendril on his wings swelled and burst, and with his good arm he held both the Mayuri and Nimue dolls in his hand. The paralysis had already taken effect in his left shoulder, meaning that it was disabled for at least the rest of the fight. Mayuri stared at him blankly, head tilting as he saw the dolls. He hadn't seen any of his particularly abilities yet, so he was fascinated by what the Arrancar could do. The Novena Espada wasted no words, instead using one of his fingers to flick the doll of Mayuri lightly. Mayuri felt the light bit of force across his forehead, putting a finger to where it was irritated. He looked back at Sale, who was now grinning despite his injury. Don't tell me, Mayuri said, as Sale used his free arm to pry open the tops on both dolls. Inside, he could see their organs, colored and labeled for him to pick up. He plucked out a red ball from Mayuri's doll, holding it in his fingers. Don't come any closer now. Take one step away from that spot, and I'll crush both your hearts where you stand. There's something I need to look for around here, and I can't have you mess that up. Seo threatened. On the outside, Mayuri looked submissive and subservient, but on the inside he was scheming, looking for a way out of this, or how he could use Seo's mercy to his advantage. I'm going to go in your specimen lab, Seo announced. He looked at Nimue very quickly, but on the inside he was seething. How dare an Arrancar try to set foot into his specimen lab? With his fingers still on Mayuri's heart, he walked out the research lab, where he couldn't see them. Maybe he was trying to bluff, but whatever the case, Mayuri called it. Nimue, get me item number 4544 from the biology lab section E5 and bring them here immediately. Also, remove all vials of antidotes stored within the facility. Mayuri ordered. Yes, Mayuri-sama. And you? Once you have returned with the dummy organs, I will head to the specimen lab and resume my fight there. I will begin compiling my list of information on the Arrancar immediately, he said, a grin entering his face. Magnificent! Seo exclaimed, as he entered Mayuri's specimen lab, by far the most spacious and most packed room within the entire facility. And it was a scientist's dream come true. The walls were packed to the brim with creatures preserved in formaldehyde, and there were even some Shinigami, human, and Quincy corpses hung upon the walls. Some of them were preserved, and some of them were fresh. Things weren't going his way in that battle, but now he could turn it around completely. Not to mention, this was the most likely place where he could find the key. He stood at the center, marveling at the specimens and actually zoning out for a while there. Magnificent, isn't it? I'll have you know that you'll be a part of it soon enough. Mayuri's voice sounded from behind Seo, and he saw the captain hobble into the room. Nimue was not with him. Oh, back so soon? I thought I told you to stay put, lest in case I do this, Seo said. He still had the doll in his reach, and without wasting any words, he plucked the heart from the Mayuri doll and crushed it right before his very eyes. Nothing happened. Seo grunted in surprise. What? He took another, less fatal organ from the doll and crushed it too. Again, Mayuri was unaffected by the entire thing, and Seo was getting frustrated. He tossed the doll down to the ground, stomping on the thing, breaking replica organs that should have been affecting the real thing. Why? Why won't you die? Seo said. Seriously? You give me a few moments alone in my own facility, and I can figure out your weaknesses and how to exploit them. All I did was replace my real organs with dummies. Dummies? You actually have dummy organs in stock here? Seo asked incredulously. Are you touched in the head? Of course I have dummy organs in stock, Mayuri replied. Seo grit his teeth in anger, before he cast the doll to the side, trying to figure out a new way to attack. He opened the slit on his back where the black cloning liquid poured from, rushing Mayuri with Sonito. Mayuri slashed with his Zanpakuto, but Seo hopped into midair, blocking the blade with his sandal. Ha! 10 years ago I would never dream of doing this. But Naruto is a slave driver with his training, and he always knew that my direct combat abilities were lacking. Damn you! Mayuri shouted. Using his free hand, he took his ear scythe and threw it at Seo, ripping off one of his wings and forcing him back. The tendril crashed to the ground, and Seo used his good hand to clutch the wound. Son of a bitch, he muttered to himself. He could have probably ended this fight with just his first release, but he wanted to finish this with the least amount of time and effort possible. You're starting to annoy me, Kuratsuchi Mayuri. I don't like dealing with annoying opponents, especially when they claim to be just as brilliant as myself, Seo exclaimed, backing into the middle of the room. He lifted his one good arm, charging up his Ryatsu. Resurrection for Nicaras, segunda etapa, he muttered, as pink Ryatsu exploded around the specimen room. Mayuri's eyes widened. He knew about the Arrancar Resurrection. He didn't know that there was another stage to it. Fascinating. Arrancars have a second release. Who knows the type of abilities that they could have? He said, intrigued by the possibilities. Sale was emerging from his cloud of Ryatsu, meanwhile. When he got out, he was different, even by his first release's standards. While his mask fragments remained the same, his eyes were golden yellow, pupils rounded. His hair was slightly longer, reaching down to his chest. When he moved, the purple tendrils on the ends of the strands of hair whipped around. His purple fingernails got even longer, and his sleeves disappeared completely, dozens of purple tendrils dripping off his skin itself. His four wings split into 16, red tendrils shifting into the back of them as they whipped around behind Sale, almost like a wheel or a moving halo. The bottom half of his robe from his first release had vanished completely, turning into an armored worm-like tail. His hollow hole became visible for the first time, being where his crotch once was. And Mayuri was grinning like a madman. Interesting. This is your segunda etapa, as you call it, he commented, taking his blade out. Sale only grinned, a horribly remarkable sinister grin that put even Mayuri's to shame. You won't find it interesting for long, Sale said. Instead of the slightly feminine voice that Sale always had, it was a bit more guttural, which fit his bizarre second release. Black liquid dribbled out from both his mouth and back, as all the tendrils along his body liquefied. Even from his hollow hole and parts of his tail black excretions of liquid emerged. He spread his arms out and grinned through a mouthful of liquid. The black liquid formed into many different globules, before Sale brought his arms together. Like they had a life of their own, the black globes of liquids flew in every which direction, splattering all over containers of dead animals and specimens within the lab. Mayuri was outraged by this. What? What do you think you're doing? He cried at Sale, after watching him deface his life's work. Maybe he shouldn't have let him go to the specimen lab in the first place. There were not many things that could catch Kuratsuchi Mayuri off guard. He was a scientist by nature. He was used to disgusting and horrible things, and even an opponent far beyond his strength wasn't something he lost his shit to. With that said, seeing his dead specimens suddenly come back to life and head for one was one of the few things that did. What is this? He exclaimed, watching the animals unfasten the lids off their jars and crawl onto the floor. Even the Shinigami on the wall had used their Zanpakuto to cut their bondings and flop onto the floor. Mayuri looked around himself, debating on whether or not he should use his Zanpakuto on his precious specimens. They were rapidly gaining on him. Snakes and other reptiles, birds, hollows, Shinigami, and even creatures that any normal person couldn't even describe were edging in on him at quite the fast rate. And the thing they had in common, they all had the same markings around their eyes. Yes, you have fallen victim to my possession. If I touch anything, living or dead, with my special black liquid, they instantly become under my control. I can even bring them back to life and force them to do my bidding. How does it feel to be held down by the very own creatures you've researched and collected over the years? Does it hurt? You, how dare you! Mayuri managed to get out, as he was bitten by several of his animals. One of the Quincy was firing up his bow. Yes. Yes. Writhe in pain and suffering. Sale quacked maniacally, spreading out more liquid around the specimen jars. I knew I could work this room to my advantage. If I had stayed in the other one any longer, you would have found a way to defeat me, and I can't have that. Mayuri was running out of options. He hadn't been able to become fully prepared for this fight, despite his dummy organs. He just didn't have the time to research everything about Sale. He was still in his shurikai, but he was getting ganged up on by his own specimens. His Zanpakuto didn't have an attack that covered a wide amount of distance. His mind worked towards one option, but this was a precious place to him. He couldn't use a destructive force like his Bankai here, especially with specimens that have been untouched. But it looked like he didn't have any options. Damn you to hell, he grimaced, so lowly that Sale couldn't even hear it. He sliced one of his specimens in half with his Zanpakuto, feeling a little bit of a sting at the fact that he just destroyed one of his own possessions. Bankai. Well, looks like Sale is going wild over there. Didn't really expect that from him. Naruto muttered, as he made his way through the streets of Siriidai. He was en route to the 1st Division's barracks, but before he went there, he noticed something pretty interesting in the sky. There was Barragan, walking along in the sky with his 6 fraction behind him, 2 of which were carrying his throne for him. He always liked to pretend he was still a king, but that wasn't why Naruto was so interested in him. Baragon kept on stealing glances at Naruto as he passed by, looking in his direction every few seconds. Baragon seemed to be heading to the 11th division for the time being. Maybe it had something to do with the strategy. His abilities would be perfect for the 11th division, with physical combat against him a big no-no. So, he's up to something, huh? Naruto muttered to himself. He would follow Baragon for the time being. Out of all the Espada, Baragon was the least loyal to Naruto, and Naruto knew why too. They were very similar, they had similar pasts, similar lives of ruling. And their history had crossed on more than one occasion. Not to mention, Baragon was an ancient hollow with a wealth of experience, who thought he was the one who should be ruling. Yamamoto could wait right now. Naruto needed to see if the old hollow was going to be a thorn in his side one last time,